If you want to start growing Cabernet vines, you should absolutely not plant seeds from a Cabernet grape. In fact, if you did plant a whole vineyard with seeds, be they Chardonnay, Cabernet, or other variety, many of the resulting vines wouldn't produce grapes, and the ones that did would be unrecognizable, looking and tasting completely different from what had been planted. So how do we get new vines for a vineyard? Hello, enophiles. Today I'm discussing vine propagation, including some interesting facts that come up when delving into the topic. So grab your favorite wine and cheers the like button. Let's say we want to plant a specific grape variety, such as Chardonnay, on an empty parcel of land. First, it may help to understand what a grape variety like Chardonnay is. Chardonnay is part of the species Vitis vinifera, or the European wine grape. The genus Vitis boasts over 80 species of grapes, including Vitis riparia and Vitis labrusca, which is known for the Concord grape. While wines are made from some of these species, wines made from Vitis vinifera grapes make up the vast majority of all wine production and 100% of all the finest wines in the world. Vitis vinifera has quite literally thousands of different varieties or cultivars. These are grapes that have been cultivated for their unique and desirable traits, and include Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, and of course the Chardonnay we want to plant. Each variety often has multiple clones with such riveting names as 76, 71.1, 4, and Hudson. Clones have distinct characteristics that make them unique while still falling under the umbrella of their variety. These differences can be extremely useful. For example, one clone may grow better in cooler climates than its counterparts, while another may produce tropical fruit aromas that fit the winemaker's intended style, and still another might flourish in a specific type of soil. Talking about clones may not seem important to the question of how to plant Chardonnay, but it will become quite an interesting detail in a bit. Now that we understand what a variety is, let's see how its vines reproduce to see if that sheds some light. Most grapevines are hermaphroditic, meaning they have both male and female parts and do not require other vines to create new fruits and seeds. At the heart of each flower lies an ovary encircled by 5 stamens, requiring only a sufficient breeze for pollination. When a flower fertilizes itself, even though all the resulting seeds in the grape come from only one parent, they are each genetically different. They are not just different from their parent, but also their siblings. The resulting seeds are so different from their parent that many of the vines that grow from them will be sterile and won't produce any grapes. The vines that do produce fruit will most likely produce unpleasant wines. Just because a vine can fertilize itself doesn't mean it always does. For example, Chardonnay is the result of the crossing of Pinot Noir and Gouais Blanc vines. We can try to recreate this, carefully taking a paintbrush to the stamens of Pinot Noir flower to collect the pollen, and then painstakingly place it in the ovary of a Gouais Blanc flower, or vice versa. We will still be no more likely to produce Chardonnay than your parents would be to get another copy of you if they tried to have another 100 children. This isn't unique to grapes either, and is the case with most fruits. If you plant Honeycrisp apple seeds, the apples you get will most certainly not be Honeycrisp and are unlikely to even be palatable. This is why you don't really find fruit seeds at the nursery. Okay, so planting seeds from a grape, such as Chardonnay, not only doesn't produce Chardonnay vines, but also likely produces something terrible. So how do you get more Chardonnay to plant? The simple answer is to cut a piece or a cutting from an existing Chardonnay vine and put it in the ground. With a little bit of time, it will begin to grow shoots, stems, leaves, and flowers. While not visible, it may be working even harder under the surface as it builds a structure of roots below, even bigger than what is visible above. This new vine will be genetically identical to the vine it was cut from, and now we have a new Chardonnay vine in our vineyard. We could technically stop at this point, but there are 2 very big problems here. One of them, eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed, and one that is likely not to be on your radar. The first is the problem of clones. If planting seeds creates new varieties and using cutting creates genetic duplicates, then how do we get all the diversity mentioned with clones? Chardonnay alone has over 80 clones, so where did all this diversity come from? While this problem is a real head scratcher, and we will come back to it in a bit, there is a more sinister problem under the surface of the soil, an issue so terrible that if you planted an entire vineyard with Chardonnay the way I described it, it is almost certain that every vine planted would die. Lurking in the soil, a huge threat awaits the vines. I cannot overstate how big this problem is. It has caused more damage to wine than any other pest or disease. Phylloxera is a root louse, an aphid with an insatiable appetite for Vitis vinifera. It has completely separate below and above ground life cycles, but it is underground where it is at its most devastating. Here in the soil, it will dine mercilessly on the roots of the vine, eventually killing it altogether. To this day, there is no cure, no way to remove it from the vineyards. While it seems like all hope of ever planting and harvesting that Chardonnay field has been lost, the solution has already been hinted at. Some of the other species of Vitis, such as Vitis riparia mentioned earlier, have developed defenses to this pesky problem and can be used to save our vineyard. It is possible to take 2 cuttings, one from the vine you want, such as Chardonnay, and one from a resistant vine, such as Vitis riparia, and combine them using a process called grafting. The resistant end can then be planted in the earth, and the vinifera end can remain out of the ground to produce amazing Chardonnay. As an added bonus, the different species of rootstocks have different traits and can be chosen to handle problems unique to the individual vineyard. Now that we don't have to worry about our vines dying, we can finally focus on the conundrum of clones. Over time, parts of a vine may mutate. Most of the time, these mutations aren't positive, but sometimes one is noticed that has desirable traits and is worth exploring further. Cuttings can be taken from this and propagated into new vines. This is how new clones come about, and while it sounds like we have reached the end, it actually gets a little more interesting still. These mutations can sometimes be much more different than expected and can even produce grapes with a different skin pigment than the original vines. Pinot is a grape that is much more prone to mutation than most, and a whole host of other grapes have come from it. Some of these mutations have been unique enough to warrant classifications as separate varieties. This includes Pinot Noir, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Grigio, Pinot Meunier, and more. So now you understand the interesting way that grapevines are propagated. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.